You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
And we are live. Good evening, good day, good morning, and welcome to episode 21 of the Guitar Heroes podcast. 21. Can you believe it, guys? Last week was good, wasn't it?
Enjoyed that. I enjoyed listening back to it. Me and Jay was listening back to it this morning, and we were crying. It was hilarious.
It was fun to have Mr. Varnfield join us.
That's one of the greatest things about working with old Varners. He's always fun. He's a really fun guy to be around, and we love you, Al. He won't be listening to this. I know he won't be listening. So, he's a prat.
I think in a weird way, it's refreshing to turn to a drummer or to someone who's completely not a guitarist, because so much of our like lives, it's just everything revolves around guitar, doesn't it? So it's actually nice. I mean, that bit at the end, if you haven't listened to episode 20, folks, then go back and listen to episode 20, because it was the bit at the end where it descends into.
Is this where we go into Al's corner, isn't it? And he starts reeling off like guitar facts, and
when he was just reading through the spec, and he said, "It says here fret size medium jumbo." That's so good.
And what was that?
Those
The pickups as well. He was talking about the pickups. Oh, it's so funny. Oh,
so right. So as ever, I am here today with Mr. Phil Walker and Mr. Chris Taylor.
Did you know that cats are the only mammals that can't taste sweetness?
Here we go. Is this tying into another aspect of last week's podcast, which was you and the feud with the neighbour's cat?
No, we've met again, and the neighbour's cat met Cookie as well, and nothing happened. Cookie looked at it, it looked at Cookie, and they're both ginger, so they both went, yeah, whatever. So I'll quit urinating on the garden as well, because it's just pointless. Keep forgetting where I've done it, and then I tread in it the next day.
I'm looking after my brother's cat at the moment. Maybe the next 6 months or so. His name's Bentley. He's pretty cool.
For 6 months?
Yeah, just him and his wife are moving back to Weymouth from Colchester. So,
how would you not get attached to it? How can you give it back after 6 months? I mean, if I'm with an animal for more than 6 minutes, I'm not
attached. The first night, Phil, literally, he was at our bedroom door going meow. It honestly sounded like hello. All night.
He was scared, didn't know where he was, poor thing. You not let him in the bedroom with you?
No.
Oh,
he's getting rid of his. He's got tons of fur. He's shedding his winter coat. I don't want all that over my bed.
Oh, you don't know what you're missing. We sleep with the dog and cat on our bed.
Chris, can we just address? Have you got some sort of EQ on your voice, or have you got a little sniffle this week?
I've got a little sniffle, my friend.
I thought so.
It's been a very busy week, and I think I've just. Caught something, and I'm at the tail end of it, so not too bad. It's Bentley here.
Oh, this will go down well on a podcast, won't it?
He's terrified.
Show everyone the cat.
Yeah, show everybody the cat, Chris.
He's terrified. It's the first time he's seen one of these things. So, a guitar.
So, Chris, if you're unwell, how are you managing to do this podcast? I mean, I'm surprised you're not doing it from your bed.
No, man, I'm awesome. That's why I'm just badass.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing we can say, and that's that Chris is always dressed, at least. I mean, from the top half up. I'm not sure about the waist down, but Phil, you have shown up numerous weeks in your dressing gown. You weren't ill. There was no reason.
No,
just a Tuesday.
There was a reason. I couldn't be bothered getting dressed.
Oh, fair enough. Enough. Have you got your tipple with you tonight?
Oh, it's a bit of a sad case today, guys. That's all I've got left in my port. I've only got half a pint left.
Oh, Chris, you on the red wine?
Mm-mm.
Oh, what's that?
Taylor's Port, my friend.
Oh,
the finest.
I need to get involved. I've got a nice Italian red, but I just can't get into port. I need to.
How? I love it, man. It's so good. I got this at Christmas. It's the most expensive bottle I've ever bought, and I just thought it's so great with cheese. Crackers.
What do you call an expensive bottle of port then?
I don't know, £6.
To be honest, I could have recycled what I've been trying to get rid of that cat with for £6.
I know. I paid £30 for this bottle.
Oh, and, don't pay that. Wow.
No,
I think that might have been where I went wrong. I think the last time I bought a bottle of port, I think it was from Lidl. I think.
Oh, you say that. Mine's Aldi, and I love it. It's I don't know what it is. Freshers or
Guys,
Fletchers. That's it.
Can you hear the cat? Meow. Hello.
Oh,
sorry,
poor thing.
you're probably gonna. Anyone listening to this is probably gonna just hear in the background. Hello.
They go, did you know that other guy, his house is haunted?
Right, enough waffling on about cats and port and stuff like that. On to today's subject. So we thought it was about time that we returned to our Desert Island Riffs format.
Yeah.
It's a completely original format. We thought it up all ourselves. And essentially, we focus in and we take a look at specific decades in history. We have already covered the 50s and the 60s. So if you haven't listened to those episodes, scroll back and check those out. But today, gentlemen, we arrive at the decade which I've actually been, I've been considering the most, I think, since we started this format. And it is the 1970s.
Yeah. I tell you, this has been, choosing a couple of songs has been so difficult. I think for me, this is just the pinnacle of like the best era of music. It has so much diversity and there's so much good stuff. So
when we started this, when it was way back before Christmas, wasn't it? We said let's do this thing and let's just focus in on the decades because obviously there's too much music to discuss if we just looked at everything.
Yeah.
So the 70s was the decade for me that I think I might have even said on the podcast. You know, when we get to the 70s, it is going to be impossible. Like the 50s, yeah, I could pick a couple of tracks. The 60s, as soon as you get to the 70s. So let me. I've got some notes, as you might have imagined.
Oh God, it looks like it's going to be a long episode.
I've written a short novel here. So
wait, let me just go and refill my glass.
I just want an excuse to play my own jingle again. So can someone cue my music and then I will set the scene for us in the 1970s.
Go on, Chris, you do it because I like the sound of your voice now. It's funny.
Hello, cue the music.
Was that it?
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? This is Lee's time. Let's cue the music.
What will we learn today in Lessons with Lee? Tyler, pay attention. Right, 1970s, let's do this. A lot to get through here, a lot happening, so fingers crossed Wikipedia hasn't let me down. I'm going to start by saying, boom, in 1970 we see a cultural landmine go off, and that is the Beatles disbanding. The end of Beatlemania and everything that came with it. The ripples of that would have been felt right through society, right around the world, and it would have heavily affected the art and music that was to come after that. It says a lot to me. We're leaving behind the post-war 50s and 60s optimism, and instead we're moving towards what the media at the time described as a sluggish cynicism and a distrust for the government. Those collective ideals of peace and love that we saw in the 60s are fading away, and we're seeing more of an individual kind of mindset, more of an entrepreneurial kind of I think it was described as the me generation. I think I read that somewhere. But this distrust for government, maybe rightly so. Of course, in the US, we see the Watergate scandal and President Nixon resigning over that, and how that would have heavily affected their society. And in the UK, well, and the US, we're seeing both economic powers really, really starting to suffer. Those trades and industries that we built so well through the 50s and 60s starting to lose out to the rise of the German powers, Japanese powers, and of course the Chinese industry, which was really on the up. So all of that for us in the UK was moving towards ultimately the rise of Thatcher and the Conservatives at the end of it. This is also a decade of continuing technology. This is the decade that brought us the floppy disk, the pocket calculator. We see both Apple and Microsoft being founded as companies. We see the first mobile phone networks being used and the earliest mobile phones. And it's worth a mention, I wrote down the humble post-it note. So what does this mean for music? Well, we've still got the giants. Some of the giants of the 50s and 60s. We've still got the Elvises, the Claptons, Stones, Who, all of that still being felt. And the guitar is very much here to stay at this point. People craving it. It's such a great voice for anyone feeling a sluggish cynicism or a distrust for the government. So it's really branching out. We're seeing the first commercial radio rock stations and all of the commercial rock bands that came with that. but we're also seeing it branching out into more kind of artsy styles. So obviously the prog movement, bands like Pink Floyd, but we also see the fighting back, the voice for those who are unheard, the punk movement in the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Ramones. But yeah, it's here to stay, as I say. That rhymes, here to stay, as I say. But outside of kind of guitar world and guitar music, everything is just diversifying so much. You've got the whole influence of R&B and funk really, really becoming mainstream now. All of that kind of bubbling away, which I guess ultimately built to give us the disco movement. Love it or hate it, it was absolutely huge and influenced so much more that came after in the 80s and, well, right up to today. But you've still got the folk movement as well. That's still happening. James Taylor and everyone surrounding that. Really, I mean, what a time to be around, really. In terms of music, this is... I think it's about as good as it gets, really.
My goodness, it's so much stuff.
Oh. Boogeyman, Boogeyman. Oh, sorry.
Well, I've got. It's so hard. Obviously, I've got a list of about 50 songs here, but I know it's going to be impossible to get through. I've got two main ones, I think. I'm going to kick off with 1970, Dead on 1970.
Is that just in case we do the same one, Chris? You're getting in there first.
Maybe. Here we go. Here we go.
Whoa. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, All Right Now from Free, Paul Kossoff on guitar, of course. Now, this was interesting. I was looking into this and his sound, and obviously... I was always under the impression it was always his 59 Les Paul through a Marshall Plexi. But on this album and this record, in fact, he actually hit the elements to his sound was a Selmer treble and bass 50 model amp. And that was... And I'm not sure if I'm 100% correct. No one really knows, but it's pretty much that amp with a 1959 Les Paul Special is the sound of that record.
Les Paul Special.
Yes.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, it's I think it's a 57 Les Paul Special. I think. Yeah, a 57 Les Paul Special. Dead on the year. One of the first ones in TV Yellow.
P90s.
Yeah, it's awesome. And
that's my 50th birthday present guitar. That is. Oh, you getting my juices flowing now, Chris?
Oh, I know. During 1966, Kossoff actually worked in the Selmer store in London. I don't know whereabouts that is, actually, in London. Not too far from Tin Pan Alley, I don't think. I've got it here in my notes. Give us a sec.
Not there anymore.
No, it's definitely not there. There we go. Selmer's Music Shop in Charing Cross, London. His first electric guitar was a 1960 Echo, but Bruce, being able to work through the shop as a junior salesman, he raised the money to buy Les Paul Special. And obviously working in the Selmer shop, he actually got hold of some really good amps, and I think this is why people think he used that on the record, not a Marshall. But going live, obviously it was a Marshall and his 59 Les Paul standard. So, but kicking off the 70s, I think is one of the most iconic guitar riffs of all time. I think I played that song so much. And Paul Kossoff, I know he had a very short-lived life. Actually, it's quite sad, really. But his
like 24 or something.
Yeah, so young.
Is that all? Blimey.
Yeah. That Free. You listen to those, those early recordings, and they're so good. They're so good. But then when you add on to that they were like 18 or something when they were put.
Yeah,
for those
Paul
guys,
Rogers.
That was we all probably remember our first like teenage bands when we started going out and playing pubs and stuff. They were free, like when they were 18, 19.
It's insane. Like, there's some, the Isle of Wight Festival is such a great performance to watch them. It's so raw. Like, obviously, Kossoff is the drive that he gets. I've tried to set up something similar on here. Obviously, I don't have a Selmer, but live he uses a Plexi, which I've set up on my HX Stomp this evening. I've just dimed it, which is what he did. 100 watts, just in your face. And obviously, PAF style pickups, which is kind of similar to what I've got in this gold top here. But in fact, I even need to take the reverb Here we go. It needs to be. But his sound, that vibrato he plays, you know that. I can't quite nail it. Joe Bonamassa's really good at it. Yeah,
it's killer, isn't it?
Yeah, so good. And just he's just, for me growing up, I remember listening to all the old records, and he was a big inspiration into my playing, and I thought it was a great way to kick off.
I think that riff and that song has been a little bit stolen by, not to bash cover bands and because we've all been there, but I feel like sometimes songs get so popular and they almost get adopted by the mainstream.
Yeah.
That the real music fans feel a little bit like, oh, it's a little bit too. I can't.
Yeah.
But you just go back and listen to it, and it's just kind of try and forget that, and you think, nah, it's so good. Yeah, and I tell you what, it's really, really very often misplayed. I think that opening riff. Don't you think? I see so many people play it wrong.
Yeah,
and I think one of the reasons it's tricky is because it's actually two guitar parts.
Yeah. Yeah,
and they both
tracks.
do
very,
very similar, but very, very subtly different things.
Yeah, and the interesting bit of information on that song. I might be wrong, but the song started off. The drum part on the song was like double time, like a train beat. All right now. It was supposed to be like that originally, but I don't know who the producer was who come in and said, no, that's not going to work. It's not going to sell. And he got the drummer to play like just a straight 4 to the floor. I don't know what you call it as a drummer. Al would be good here.
Well, they kind of did that train thing on the solo, didn't they?
Yes,
went to
maybe,
that on the
maybe
solo.
that's why they kept it for that part. But
yeah,
can you imagine it on the opening riff, or just as the groove of the song? It wouldn't be the same, would it?
I don't think it would.
It detached from that rock element, doesn't it? I think.
But for something that early on as well to be introducing, I mean, you've got that chord in there, you know. I just love that sound, you know, having those open strings. So you've got that layer, and then you've got, which is where you hear the little movement that, you know. But that is. And of course, the whole sort of syncopated feel in the chorus as well, with the
yeah,
and the way the bass does that.
The bass. What's it? You got that? Yeah, so good, so good.
Genius.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's my first nomination. It's been hard,
choice.
but I think that was definitely a good one to kick us off with. So.
Very, very worthy. Nice one.
Nice. Very good. Very good.
Did anyone
Phil?
choose that one? Did anyone have that down?
Yeah. Well, I'll let Phil go first, and then yeah. Well,
okay.
As
So
you might guess,
my first one
was.
No. And then my second one was. Okay, so if Carlsberg made country players, it'd be this guy. This guy was born in 1943. He also plays piano and mandolin, and this song, which he's most famous for, was released in 1979 and was the lead track from his album Hiding, which is a good album to get on vinyl, guys. And this is what I'm talking about. Country boy, Mr. Albert Lee. Yeah, a lot of people don't probably think of Albert Lee in the 70s. I mean, he did so much after that. But like I say, 1979 was when Country Boy was released. And thank God it was, because I've been a huge fan of Albert Lee. He is my guitar hero. I've actually met him 2 or 3 times, which is really cool. First time I couldn't speak to him, actually. I went
restraining order, was it?
Pretty much, yeah. After that, it was, yeah. But no, I saw him at Mr. Kipps in Poole, and there were about 40 people in watching him, which it was a shame, but it felt like a private concert. It was amazing. And at the end of the night, I bought a CD, and I went up to him to sign it because he just. I mean, it was funny when he came in. He was a little bit late, and he literally just walked through the crowd, what there was of it, up onto the stage. He took his coat off, turned around and went, "Sorry we're late, we've just been for a curry." He was so laid back and just got on stage and did a blasting set to 40 people. And then, at the end of the night, I'm stood there with my CD, and Jay had to say, "Oh, would you sign this for him, please?" And I stood there with my gob out of the floor. I couldn't believe it. And then another time I met him was at Wimborne, and he actually signed one of my Telecasters, which was amazing. There's some pictures on Instagram of that, but yeah,
I think I've seen that. Yeah,
he was known as the Telecasting King, because I was known for playing a Telecaster, a 53, and a few others. But he got I think it was in the mid-80s. Sterling Ball gave him a really weird looking thing. I've got it here tonight, but you guys can't see it apart from Lee and Chris can. But that's when the Albert Lee's signature was kind of born. He played that for a few years, and the back burned it. And then I think it was probably 8 years later, maybe, that they decided to do a signature model of it, and it sold really well, obviously. But yeah, for people who not that familiar with Albert Lee, he's one of these people that you've probably heard many times on the radio and not even realised it was him. I mean, he's played on so many people's albums. I mean, the Everly Brothers, Emmylou Harris, Eric Clapton, Brad Paisley, Heads, Hands and Feet, Bill Wyman's Rhythm Kings. He just goes on and on. This guy has got credits on nearly everybody's album. And it basically his setup is a guitar. I think he's still got it, a Korg A3 effects processing unit, which I think he puts a little bit of compression and a tiny bit of chorus, but hardly anything. And used to plug into a Music Man amp. He uses Fender now, and that's it. He hates pedals, and he's Mr. Clean. You know, he's superb. And like I say, I've seen him about 2 or 3 times, and the guy's knocking on now. He's in his 70s, you know, and he still would probably gig 300 times a year if he could.
Yeah.
You know, he does gig a lot, and he travels a lot. He lives in America, and he's always over here playing. And the thing I've noticed with Albert is, as you get older, speed isn't quite what it used to be when you're younger. That's just age. That's your fingers. That's your joints. But what he does, he plays a lot of tasteful stuff. So rather than all the really fast stuff, he's like. You know, a lot of like harmony stuff and double stopping, and it's just so tasteful. Everything that he plays is great. And when that restraining order's lifted, I am going to go see him again when I can.
But it's funny.
He was one of the original sort of like English London session guys as well, wasn't he? He in that gang with like Beck and Jimmy Page, you know, the London scene, but quite unique as well. And maybe why he's not such a household name is because he did follow the country influence, which is quite unusual, I think. Remember the first time I heard Albert Lee, I just assumed that he would be an American guy. I just assumed.
Yes,
we're not really known for our chicken picking telly players, are we?
No, that's very true. Although he has lived in America a long time. I think a lot of his work was over there. You know, like say Emmylou Harris and what have you. He was and the Red Hot Band, and it was probably picked up a lot from America. But yeah, I mean, there's something special about this guy from England to just pick that style of music, you know, and
yeah,
you know,
and also be like really revered by those American country players. He's not like a copycat. He's like the guy that they look up to as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which almost makes it more confusing because you're like, wait, this guy's like English, you know, and he's like country god.
You know what I find really cool about Albert Lee is that I think the last time I saw him a couple of years ago was at is it the Corn Exchange in Dorchester? Is that what it's called? Is it Corn Exchange?
Yeah, there is a Corn Exchange.
Yeah, it was there. It's only a small place, and you know, we saw him there, and it was busy. Obviously, I don't know, it probably holds 100. 200 people tops, something like that. And it's funny, I passed a cafe on the way there, and he's sat in the cafe with his band, just having a coffee, and as we're all going to the gig and what have you. And then the next time you'll see him, he'll be playing with someone like Vince Gill.
Yeah.
You go, hey, he's just been sat in a cafe in Dorchester. You know what I mean? And I've just watched him play, and he's come up and signed a CD or something. And then, like you say, next time he's doing like the Crossroads Festival with Clapton or something.
It's
or
crazy,
something
isn't it?
massive, It's
It's a bit like Robbie McIntosh, the Weymouth-based guitar player. I think he was brought up in Surrey, I think. But like, it's funny. Like, I went to see John Mayer a few years back, and he was on stage on one of the nights. And the next evening, I think he couldn't support John Mayer, play for John Mayer the following night because he had a gig at the Star in Weymouth, which is like, a really boxy little pub, But it's so, these sort of musicians, they're so down to earth, aren't they? They just love music, and, they're not beneath anything. And
certain musicians, Chris, certain others
musicians.
are, a bit above the station, and not a quarter of the player as people like Robbie and Albert Lee, But yeah, I mean, these guys that they've done the massive gigs. I mean, huge gigs with huge stars, and you could probably just like take Albert out for a coffee, and it's just like going out with a friend. Yeah. He's got I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years now. He's had a new band. They're all young guys, and this Albert Lee at the front in his 70s, and I'm thinking he's wore the other bands out. He's had to get a bunch of new guys.
I can see why.
So demanding. I remember turning up to rehearsal. Obviously, we're doing Country Boy, and I think there's a few spots where I do a little bit of soloing, but and then you guys are like, "Oh, we're playing at 165." I'm like, "What?" It's like 10 BPM faster than the original. I'm like, Jesus, I was struggling with the original pace as it was.
Well, the thing is, it's third song from the last, isn't it? In the first set, I'm thinking if you're not warmed up by then, you never will be.
No.
Yeah, but we've still got a couple of songs to get through before we can go and have a break.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem.
Exactly. That's my nomination.
It's a great choice. Yeah, great song. Yeah.
You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
Right, so as I've already hinted, just didn't know where to start with this really. Just too many things. Interestingly, I went through the set list that we've done in the guitar show. I thought that would be a good place to start, and it was something like 70% of the stuff in the set was from the 70s. We do go from the 50s and bring you up to date, but you cannot deny the fact that the 70s is really like the giant era for guitar music. So I was just going to play through a few things here that you may or may not have considered that were from the 70s. Okay, so okay, we all know what that is. What about this one? 70s. What about this one? I had on that list as well. All right now. What about this one? The list just goes on and on.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had a clean sound now, I'd be playing a bit of Sultans of Swing. Of course, another one we do in the show.
Yeah.
I think we've already touched upon, this was another tricky thing as well. So many songs that we've already mentioned, like in the guitar solos episode that we did, would have been my picks. So Hotel California.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we need to mention 1978 when we heard this. I think we've already touched on that as well, but Van Halen coming out with Van Halen 1, the album, and of course Eruption on that, which was groundbreaking in so many ways. It's certainly just in terms of where the guitar went after that. How about this one? what that did for that band and where that went from there.
Yeah, man.
But having said all this and having gone through all these tunes, there was still one that I just came back to, and again I think we have already touched on it in the guitar solos episode, so I won't play the guitar solo, but I will play this. Of course, where would we be without Bo Rap?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Slap bang in the middle of the decade, 1975, Queen come out with their fourth album, A Night at the Opera, and their first #1 single, Bohemian Rhapsody. And I actually rewatched the film about a week ago.
Yeah.
And as if you needed any more reminding of how epic that band and that song was, and everything that surrounded it.
Wasn't it the was Bo Rap the B-side, wasn't it, of I'm in Love with My Car or something? Is that right?
I don't think so. I think it was issued. It was issued again in 1991 as a single with something else, but I think it was just. I don't know. You could be right there. That didn't come up in my research, but I'm not to say that my research is that thorough.
Damn Wikipedia.
But no, it is definitely one of the kind of the pinnacle songs of the 70s, isn't it? I mean, it's testing guitar sounds as well. Brian May, obviously, with his big rack systems, and obviously you talking earlier about Phil, about Albert Lee's not a big fan of pedals. I mean, the 70s wasn't a big era for guitar players with pedals. I mean, you would have a couple maybe, but it was more a case of racks as the decade went on, I think. And obviously Brian May was so experimental with his sounds, wasn't he? I think.
I think a lot of the bigger guitar effect systems and the racks that we started to see in the 80s only came about because of the experimentation that had happened in the studios in the 70s.
Yeah.
So you've got albums like Night at the Opera, and of course then from them where Floyd went and David Gilmour and all his experimentation. I think because studio technology had started to get really kind of cutting edge, and they were experimenting with layers and effects and doing things, really quite creatively with the equipment. When it then came to take that stuff out on the road and then try and recreate that, I think that suddenly is why there was the demand for the pedal manufacturers, effects manufacturers, all that stuff to happen, which did come a little bit later. Like you say, Chris, Brian May was experimenting, but interestingly, on that song, it was obviously that was one of the few songs that was entirely from the mind of Freddie, the genius of Freddie. And if you've seen the film, you'll kind of see a bit about that. But Brian's first solo is the only bit of that entire song that wasn't written by Freddie, and Brian knew he wanted to put a guitar solo into it, but he went about it quite simplistically because of the complexity of all the layers. I think there's something like 128 overdubs on the operatic part for vocals. So I think he was like, right, Fred's got the, he's kind of taken up most of the sonic palette in this song. What can I do to make it stand out? And he just said it needs to just be a single guitar, a singing single guitar with a beautiful counter melody to Fred's melodies. And of course, that's what we got in that famous guitar solo. He used the Deaky amp, if you've heard of the Deaky amp, which was something that I think John Deacon had actually made, hadn't he?
Yeah, Brian May still got it as well. And in fact, they did Vox did a kind of reissue on it a few years ago. It was this little white, you might have sold them in the shop.
Yeah,
I
white
heard
boxes.
About this. Yeah, they're amazing. They're so hard to get hold of now. If you ever see one, I think they were about 99 quid when they came out, these things, and now they're probably about 300-400 quid if you want to buy one. But if you ever do get a chance to buy one at a good price, get one. They're great fun, really fun little things.
Well, I must have sold a handful of them, but at the time, for whatever reason, I didn't realise what it is. But now, reading about it, I'm thinking, man, I wish I'd picked one of those up.
Yeah.
But really interesting. I found this like an extract from an interview with Brian May. And this is something really interesting that I've often thought about and sometimes applied where I can. He composed that solo in his mind, or with his voice more than his guitar, because there was a quote that said that when he falls back to his guitar and his fingers, the fingers can fall into old habits and become a little bit textbook. So he said for this song, it was so grand, the perfect opportunity to just experiment with something. The solo was entirely composed in his mind, humming it out loud before he actually picked up the guitar to play it, which is really cool. And I've thought about that, obviously, because it's all if you're creating music, it's all coming from your brain at the end of the day. Yeah. But I think as guitar players, we can all fall into the trap of the same old tricks, the same old licks, and kind of being a slave to your fingers instead of where does your mind actually want to go with this.
This is why guitar players always fall into ruts, I think, is because their mind naturally goes, oh, just do that. I know this. I'm comfortable with this. And especially, like you say, the song is so grand. Like, it needs something that's not something you're generally going to hear on the electric guitar, is it? It has to just be something so musical that you could play it on any instrument. And in fact, you can sing it back, can't you? You can sing all of those solos back, which is,
It obviously works, because you think, I mean, I can't really think of many more melodic solos than the Bohemian Rhapsody solo. So you can just imagine Brian kind of singing it. It's the kind of thing that you would create in that way. It's very vocal, very melodic. So maybe that's a little nugget that we should, anyone who's trying to write anything like that could take away and say, well, if you can sing it, and if it's something like an earworm before you even pick up your guitar, then you're on to a winner, because he must have actually had to sit down and go, right, I've got this idea. Now I need to figure it out on the guitar. Yeah. Which is quite, I don't think most of us approach it that way. I think most of us go, oh, listen to this riff or this lick I've just come up with.
Yeah, exactly.
Another interesting point about that album and that song in general, which I don't think they focused on particularly closely in the film, was that Queen were basically bankrupt at the point that they made that album. They'd done 3 albums before, but they'd signed a really, really bad production deal in the early days, which essentially meant that they were working for a production company that was then going to farm their music out to record labels. So the production company was making the money. And Queen, I have it here, Queen were actually being paid £60 a week at that point, even though they'd had hit records. And there's instances in interviews where they'd said that they told Roger not to hit the drums so hard, because if he broke his sticks, they didn't want to have to pay for many more. At the time, John Deacon was trying to buy a house, and he was turned down for a deposit on his mortgage. It was literally like they did a good job of getting across the make or break part in the film, where famously they had the argument with the record label guy who said, 5 years from now, no one would have ever heard of Queen. We'd never put out this 6-minute long operatic nonsense, and obviously they proved him wrong. But adding on top of that, the fact that they were basically penniless as well, in relative terms to where you'd think they'd be at that point. So there you go. Where would we be without Queen and Bo Rap?
Well, talking about melodic guitar, I have a nomination for the 70s. I don't think we've actually mentioned him yet, but let me play it for you. Does anyone know it?
Carlos.
Yeah, it's awesome, but I don't have the I can't get the sustain that he has. My guitar dies too soon. But yeah, Carlos Santana with the song Europa. Literally one of my favourite songs, if not my favourite song of all time. I remember coming home from school and sticking on the stereo headphones and just lying on my bed, just listening to that on vinyl, and just melt into it. It's so good. But the version I always listened to was from the 77 album Moonflower. That's like a double album. It's like got studio tracks and live tracks, and they're just all interspersed into each other. But that's a good example of how music in the 70s was so varied, because that album just shows a lot of experimental, like jazz fusion and a fusion of Latin and rock guitar, and it's such a unique sound in its own right, isn't it? I think almost its own genre. Santana, I suppose, could be classed as its own genre in some way.
Definitely.
But his sound as well is really interesting. He used the Yamaha SG-2000 on that record, with vintage PAFs going into a Mesa Boogie Mark 1.
Yes.
That's his sound. And what I find quite interesting is live, apparently during sound checks, he used to figure out where he would need to stand to get the feedback from his amp, and then he would mark the stage with his tape so he knew where to stand. I think no one really does that nowadays, do they? I don't think.
Yeah, I do that. I have to do that because for years we didn't have any backline on stage, so I had to try find with the PA where the feedback note would be on Parisian walkways.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I used to have to do that all the time, and then I'd forget. By the time it came to the song in the second set, I'm going, oh, where am I supposed to stand again?
Why is Phil holding this one note and wandering around the stage
aimlessly? Yeah.
with a puzzled
Don't go
look?
too near the edge.
Yeah. But,
It's a good one. Did you know that Carlos put the boogie in Mesa Boogie? Did you know that?
did he?
No idea. It was
No idea.
it was when who was it? Randall Smith was developing his amps. Carlos was one of the first players to kind of road test a Mesa prototype, and he said, "Wow, that thing really boogies." And I think that's where the boogie came from.
Oh, interesting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. But you're right, Chris, the diversification, the broad spectrum of genres that were all really popular. That's the thing. We're not talking like niche. If you ever hear those radio shows where it's like, and today in 1974, I heard one of those, and it was just depressing to hear the rundown of like the top 20, because you've got like James Taylor and that whole folk scene happening. You've got the Grateful Dead. You've got Santana. You've got Queen. Eric Clapton.
Well, okay,
like
here's one,
Zeppelin.
Lee. Here's one you haven't
just-
mentioned yet. Okay. 1977. You ready for it? You rating?
Go on, go on. Oh, man.
The Mighty Quote.
Yeah.
Oh, how could we forget?
The Mighty Quote. Do you know what? I thought one of you guys might have done that, actually. But, oh, God, I've seen
honestly
Quo loads
thought-
of times. The race.
I thought Phil was going to... I knew Phil was going to bring Quo up. That's why I didn't touch them. I knew that was going to be Phil's bag. So thanks, you did it.
I'm so
Hang on,
predictable.
now I need to go.
Yeah. What key are you in? Thank you, Zoom. Yeah, no,
Oh,
man.
man.
Quo are one of my favourite live bands. They're just amazing, and they've had a bit of misfortune. You know, Rick Parfitt died. I think it was on a Christmas Eve, wasn't it, a few years ago? And oh man, I was gutted. I was actually on my way to a gig on Christmas Eve, and I put the radio on and found out Rick Parfitt had died, and I was like, no. I mean, that guy. You know, that guy could give Joe Walsh a run for his money when it comes to rock and roll. Really,
Yeah.
You know, he had like a quadruple heart bypass, and then 2 days later, he sat in his hospital bed having a fag and a glass of red wine. You know what I mean? It's like, how rock and roll
I
does
think
it get?
I think they're another band that like what I was saying with All Right Now. Some of their songs have become so popular and so well adopted by the mainstream listener that a lot of maybe guitar players and like real serious music fans would kind of overlook that stuff. And although Quo maybe don't have the technical intricacies of Free, man, the songwriting, that's not a hard thing. That's not an easy thing to do. How often does a Quo song come on the radio and you just cannot like smile at your head? When you were playing that then, Phil, I'm smiling, my head's bobbing, I know what's coming, and just to witness that in amongst a huge crowd, that is an art.
Well,
in
actually,
itself,
they did
isn't
have a
it?
few tricky things. I mean, that, you know, the Whatever You Want intro, you know, that's just not a straightforward thing, you know. The intro, a mystery song, that's a nice little intro as well. You know, they did have some quite tasty little bits and pieces in their songs.
Mystery
Down,
song.
That Down's another
yeah.
great intro, great guitar intro is that, and there's something that it's not a Phil's rant because it's not the episode to do a rant, but the thing that kind of chews my toffee a little bit is that when you get
what did you say last week? You said something. Sorry, you said something brilliant last week. It was like blows my candle out.
Oh, that's it.
Something like that. This is great. We should be writing these down.
Well, yeah, the thing that annoys me, right, is that the slating Francis Rossi for going out and doing it without Rick Parfitt. They're saying, oh, it's not Quo. You know, they've got a young guy, Richie Malone, who actually was in Quo. He was approved by Rick Parfitt because Rick Parfitt was ill and he stood in for some dates and now he's just carried on. But, you know, I think if they've got an audience, if they're enjoying it, if they're still turning out good music, which it still sounds really good to me, then, you know, why not do it? Leave them alone. Let them get on with it. If you're not into it, don't go watch them. Simple.
No, exactly.
I think surely that's what Rick would want.
I think
it's
so.
more of it can be a celebration of him and a celebration of the band. Like you say, if you've got people say that about. I mean, people give Queen because really it's just obviously Brian and Roger that are going out and they get stick for it. But I think, well, what would Freddie want and what do the fans want? If the fans are there waiting to have a good time and pay the money to see the band, like, what's the problem?
Well, to be honest, I really think Freddie Mercury would definitely approve of Adam Lambert.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Not just as a vocalist, as a fine young man.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I could be turned. He's a good-looking fella, is Adam Lambert.
But man, I tell you, out of the 70s, there have been so many good stuff, and no one's mentioned yet David Bowie either. The
Mick Ronson.
I don't even know it. I don't even.
So we're used to that on this podcast, Chris. Don't worry about it.
I used to play this years ago. Yeah, some great tracks. I'm trying to think. Stuff's coming to mind now. I don't know if this is 70s, but feel like Making Love, Bad Company.
Yeah, I think that is, and like and Boston, and wasn't the whole like glam rock thing? Haven't we got a bit of? Isn't all that kicking off in the 70s?
Yeah, man. Oh, Jesus.
What about
bit of Doobie.
It's hang on. What about?
Yeah.
It's like the list is endless.
Like you can even go into like again like different styles, but like Michael Jackson with the no, Billie Jean. That's 80s, right?
That is.
He's skipping forward. He's skipping
Damn
forward
it, Chris. Getting ahead of ourselves there. well, look, to kind of conclude this and to wrap up, I thought I'd just throw these little nuggets out there as well because I found this really weird. I was looking at like best-selling albums and best-selling singles, and it was surprisingly hard to narrow down. I mean, different websites were giving me different information, so it was difficult. But I think this looks to be accurate. Certainly for the UK, at least, the best-selling single of the 70s was "Mull of Kintyre" by Wings. Right, and the best-selling album, maybe slightly less obscure, but the best-selling album is "Bridge Over Troubled Water," Simon and Garfunkel.
That doesn't surprise me, actually. No, that doesn't surprise me.
I've actually got some...
But I didn't expect to see that in amongst all the great stuff we've discussed and the huge... I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm a guitar player and I'm biased, but...
Yeah.
You know.
I did actually look for some... I was thinking on these Desert Island Riffs, I was going to try and pick out some musical trivia, stuff that's actually happened on this day in the 70s.
Oh, okay. Ooh,
oh,
a new section.
Yeah, I've got one. Can I just say it quickly, Chris, because I'll forget. I will.
Of course, it's going to be what I've got written down here. Of course, it is.
It might not be. It might not be. Is it about the 30th of March?
No, it's everything I mentioned is stuff that's actually happened. Yeah, on the 30th of March, but on various years in the 70s. So
right. Okay. It's Eric Clapton's birthday today.
Oh, it is.
Eric Clapton, and I believe he's 76, is it now? Yeah, Eric Clapton's birthday. So big happy birthday to Mr. EC. The world wouldn't be the same place without
That's going to sound horrendous.
But on this day, in 1974, John Denver went to #1 in the US singles chart with the song "Sunshine of My Shoulders." It's the singer's first of 4 US #1s. In '76, the Sex Pistols played their first show at the 100 Club in London.
How can we forget?
I know.
God save the Queen. We mean it, man.
We've lost him. Lee, come back to us. Come back.
We love our Queen. I mean, the Clash.
I know.
Ramones.
Yeah, speaking of the Clash, in '78, on this day, in 1978, Paul Simonon and Nicky Headon from the Clash were arrested in Camden Town after shooting down racing pigeons with air guns from the roof of Chalk Farm Studios. 4 police cars and a helicopter were required to make the arrest. Their fines totaled 800 quid. There we go.
Wow.
A bit of useless trivia for you.
Do you know what? Having done all of this and all of this conversation and research and everything, it makes me sad. I'm going to be honest. It makes me sad and it makes me jealous of those people that were around in the 70s to lap up all this music, and those musicians that were around in the 70s to enjoy it. And
Yeah.
you know,
I did enjoy it. It was brilliant.
Was that the 1870s or 1970s?
Oh, sorry, you're on about the 1970s. Yeah. So, yeah.
But there's so many. There's one guy I haven't mentioned who's my all-time favorite guitar player. I didn't want to mention him because I don't
Peter
want.
Frampton?
Yeah, I didn't want to over-mention him. But again, for me, one of the biggest selling albums of the '70s is "Frampton Comes Alive." In terms of rock,
Still haven't
rock
listened to
guitar.
that. Need to listen to that. On
Oh,
vinyl.
man.
We all know that we could fill.
We
I
could
think
just go on.
like do
We
the
should- we-
70s
do
part
you know
2,
what?
the 70s part 3.
Let's do a part 2. Let's do a part 2, man. I've literally got so much here. There's so much.
I'll tell you what
Alright,
else
maybe
came from
we'll
the 70s,
revisit.
Chris. This was just for you, Chris. What came from the 70s? My Strat that you've fallen in love with. That came
Yeah,
from the
79.
70s, didn't it, Chris?
It did. A fine piece of machinery that is. Oh,
Chris is now going to disagree because it's known that I was going to say as well, just quickly, so I know you want to wrap up, Lee, but the Gibson Les Paul made a big comeback in the 70s, didn't it? Thanks to the guys from Thin Lizzy, the Les Paul Deluxe, and that made a big comeback. And Fender sort of went down a little bit in production. I know most of they kind of forgot the shape of the Telecaster in the 70s.
Do you know, I actually tried to look into the most played guitar in the 70s, and when I look at the 70s, just off the cuff, I just see the Les Paul.
I'm with you there.
I can't, other than Status Quo with the tellies, I can't see a Strat in the 70s anywhere.
Richie Blackmore. Richie Blackmore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Jimi Hendrix as well. He sort of spilled just out into the 70s.
Wasn't it? Oh, God, I've forgotten Jimmy's death.
Was it 72, Jimmy's death?
I might have to look that up and edit it in. That's sacrilege, really, isn't it?
We
But
should
you
know
are
that.
right, Chris. I think Les Paul. I think it was the era of the Les Paul and the Marshall.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
It was.
If the 50s gave us the Telecaster, the 60s, we had all the Strat bands, then the 70s is your Les Paul and your Marshall.
It is.
The 18th of September 1970, Jimi Hendrix died.
I was going to say, I'm sure it was
Yeah,
70. Yeah. So look at that. We're kicking off this decade with the Beatles breaking up and Jimi Hendrix dying. Now, those two events should have predicted that the next 10 years, well, certainly the next few years, would have maybe been a little bit somber on the music scene. But, man, we, as a society, I think we bounced back from those two tragedies.
And I was
fairly
born in
well.
the 70s, so that was a good vintage as well.
Well, I've said we've stopped talking about the 1870s.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant, yeah.
God, we got a lot of mileage out of that joke, haven't we? All right, well, let's wrap it up. And as ever, thanks for listening, thanks for supporting, and maybe we will revisit this subject in future because there's too much to get through. So if you want to find us on social media in the meantime, you can head over to Instagram where you can search Phil Walker Guitar. Chris Anthony Guitar and Lee Troy Guitar. On Facebook, it's Phil Walker Guitarist, Chris Anthony Guitar and Lee Williams Guitarist. You can search for the Story Guitar Heroes on Instagram and Facebook, or head to the website www.storyguitarheroes.com. And don't forget, there's always the YouTube channel. Search Phil Walker Guitarist, where you may see Phil out on his lawn attacking the neighbour's cat. He may be in a bikini. He might just be sat there drinking port.
He might be
Or he
urinating.
might be playing
Who
guitar.
knows?
You might have to scroll down a bit, but you'll be able to see a picture of Albert Lee signing my guitar.
Oh, okay.
So I
There
think
you
you've
go.
got to scroll down a fair way, but it's on there somewhere.
Maybe you could just repost it.
I could do that, couldn't I? Yeah, I
That's
could
getting
do
a bit
that.
technical, Chris. That's getting a bit technical.
I'll just put it on again. Is that the same thing? I don't know. This technology. They didn't have this in the 70s.
No.
Right, I'm going for my dinner. Been a pleasure, chaps.
Yep.
And thank you to the listeners. We'll see you next time.
See you
Goodbye.
soon. Bye.
I really need a wee.